Sometimes the smallest decision becomes the moment that defines an entire life, but no one ever realizes it until everything has already changed. Dark clouds swallowed the afternoon sky as Nathan Brooks tightened both hands around the steering wheel of his aging pickup truck. Rain hammered against the windshield so fiercely that the wipers struggled to keep up, pushing sheets of water aside only for another wave to replace them seconds later. Visibility shrank with every mile, but Nathan refused to slow down more than necessary. Time wasn't simply important today, it meant everything. Beside him sat his 9-year-old daughter, Emma, hugging a faded blue backpack against her chest. She watched the rain race across the glass before quietly turning toward her father. "Dad, are we going to make it?" Nathan forced a reassuring smile despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "We will. Dr. Collins said he'd wait a little if traffic gets bad." Emma nodded, trying to believe him. She had learned long ago that her father always sounded confident, even when life was falling apart around them. The old heater hummed softly, barely warming the cold cabin. Nathan glanced at the dashboard clock. 3:17 p.m. They still had nearly 40 minutes before Emma's specialist appointment at the Regional Children's Hospital. Missing today's visit wasn't an option. It had taken almost 2 months to get this appointment after endless phone calls and paperwork. Nathan had traded work shifts, borrowed money for fuel, and skipped countless meals just to make sure his daughter would finally receive the treatment she needed. Another burst of thunder rolled across the mountains. The narrow highway twisted through dense pine forests, climbing higher with every curve. Few vehicles dared travel this route during storms like this. Then something unusual caught Nathan's attention. Far ahead, beyond the curtain of rain, a pair of headlights flashed wildly. He leaned forward. A black SUV suddenly appeared sideways across the shoulder before disappearing completely beyond the guardrail. Nathan's heartbeat froze. The truck slowed instinctively. "Oh my gosh," Emma whispered. Nathan pulled onto the shoulder, his eyes fixed on the empty section of broken guardrail. Steam drifted upward from below the embankment. He knew exactly what it meant. A crash. He reached for his phone and dialed emergency services. After giving the location, the dispatcher explained that multiple weather-related accidents had overwhelmed rescue crews. "The fastest unit we can send is approximately 25 minutes away." 25 minutes. Nathan looked at the clock again. Every minute he stayed here could cost Emma the appointment they had waited months to receive. Every minute he left could cost someone else their life. He closed his eyes for only a second. When he opened them again, he had already made his decision. "Emma," he said gently, "stay inside the truck. Lock the doors. Don't come out unless I tell you." Her small face turned pale. "You're going down there? I have to see if someone's still alive." Before she could answer, Nathan grabbed an emergency flashlight and stepped into the freezing rain. Mud slid beneath his boots as he climbed over the damaged guardrail. Wind howled through the trees while rain soaked him within seconds. Carefully making his way down the steep embankment, he finally spotted the wrecked SUV resting against a cluster of rocks. Its front end was crushed. One wheel still spun slowly. Nathan hurried closer. Inside, a woman remained trapped behind the steering wheel. Blood streaked across her forehead, and her breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps. She slowly turned her head toward the stranger standing outside her shattered window. Their eyes met for only a moment. Then, with barely enough strength to speak, she whispered, "Leave me, save your little girl." For a split second, Nathan almost listened to her. The woman looked at him through the fractured windshield, rainwater mixing with the blood on her face. Her lips trembled as she struggled to breathe. "Please," she whispered again. "Your little girl, don't waste time on me." Nathan's eyes flickered toward the top of the embankment, where his old pickup truck waited. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could barely make out Emma's small silhouette sitting exactly where he had told her to stay. Every instinct as a father screamed for him to return to her immediately. But another voice, quieter yet impossible to ignore, reminded him that someone was still alive in front of him. "You don't get to decide that," Nathan replied firmly. We're both getting out of here. He tested the driver's door. It wouldn't move. The impact had twisted the frame beyond recognition. The passenger side was buried against the rocks. Nathan circled the vehicle, boots slipping in thick mud as cold rain soaked every layer of clothing. The steep hillside had become dangerously unstable. Small stones rolled beneath his feet, tumbling farther down the slope into the dark ravine below. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the forest. Nathan looked uphill. Water poured across the mountainside, carrying loose dirt and broken branches toward the crash site. The ground itself was beginning to shift. He returned to the driver's window. Can you move your legs? The woman tried. Pain instantly crossed her face. She slowly shook her head. They're trapped. Nathan aimed his flashlight inside the vehicle. The steering column had collapsed against her knees. She wasn't exaggerating. She truly couldn't move. He scanned the back seat, searching for anything useful. A heavy emergency tool rested inside a storage compartment. He reached through the shattered rear window, stretching until his fingertips barely touched it. Finally, he grabbed the tool. Taking a deep breath, Nathan struck the remaining glass around the driver's window, carefully clearing away the sharp fragments before climbing halfway inside. I'm Nathan, he said calmly. The woman managed the faintest smile. Victoria! Victoria, I need you to stay with me. Another violent clap of thunder shook the valley. Nathan wedged the emergency tool beneath the bent steering column and pushed with everything he had. Nothing. He adjusted his footing and tried again. His arms burned. His shoulders screamed in pain. Still nothing. Then, from somewhere above, Emma's frightened voice drifted through the storm. Dad! Nathan froze. The single word cut through every sound around him. He looked uphill. She had opened the truck door despite his instructions, standing beneath the pouring rain with tears streaming down her face. Dad, the hill is moving! Nathan's heart pounded. Emma! He shouted. Get back inside the truck! Right now! She hesitated only a second before climbing back inside and locking the door. Nathan forced himself to focus. Victoria's breathing had become slower. Her eyes were beginning to close. No, Nathan said firmly. Stay awake. Talk to me. You should go. She murmured weakly. I've already made my choice. Planting both feet against the crushed floorboard, Nathan pulled on the emergency tool with every ounce of strength he had left. Metal groaned. The steering column shifted. Just enough. Victoria cried out as feeling returned to one leg. We're getting somewhere, Nathan said. Then came another sound. A deep, unnatural rumble. Nathan slowly turned his head toward the mountain above them. A section of saturated earth had broken loose. Mud, rocks, and fallen trees were sliding directly toward the wrecked SUV. They had only seconds left. The difference between courage and fear is often measured in a single heartbeat. The hillside exploded before Nathan had time to think. A wave of mud, loose rocks, and shattered tree limbs thundered toward the wrecked SUV with terrifying speed. The mountain itself seemed to roar as gravity pulled everything downhill. Victoria! Nathan shouted. Ignoring the pain shooting through his shoulders, he gripped the emergency tool one last time and threw every ounce of strength into it. The bent steering column lurched upward. Only a few inches. But it was enough. Victoria gasped as her trapped legs came free. Can you move? Nathan asked. I think so. There isn't time. Without waiting for another answer, Nathan slipped one arm beneath her shoulders and another behind her knees. She cried out as he lifted her from the driver's seat, but the sound was quickly swallowed by the storm. The first wave of mud slammed into the rear of the SUV. Metal groaned. Glass exploded. Nathan stumbled forward, nearly losing his footing as slippery earth shifted beneath him. Hold on! Victoria instinctively wrapped one arm around his neck, her body trembling uncontrollably. Each step uphill became harder than the last. The rain had turned the slope into liquid clay. Nathan climbed with desperate determination, while carrying nearly all of Victoria's weight. Every few feet his boots slid backward, forcing him to start again. Above them, Emma pressed both hands against the truck window, tears filling her frightened eyes. "Come on, Dad," she whispered. Nathan could hear nothing except the pounding rain and his own heartbeat. Halfway up the embankment, another section of earth collapsed. A fallen pine tree crashed only yards behind them, striking the SUV with tremendous force. The vehicle rolled sideways. Then another. Within seconds it disappeared beneath a torrent of mud and broken branches. Had they remained inside even 10 seconds longer, either of them would have survived. Nathan finally reached the damaged guardrail. A pair of emergency responders, delayed by the storm but now arriving, rushed toward him. "We've got her!" one firefighter shouted. Nathan carefully lowered Victoria onto a rescue stretcher. Her pale fingers suddenly closed around his soaked jacket. "Wait!" Nathan leaned closer. Her blue eyes struggled to focus. "You saved me." Nathan offered a tired smile. "Anyone would have done the same." She looked at him for another brief moment, almost as if trying to memorize his face. Then exhaustion overtook her. Her hands slipped away. The paramedics quickly loaded her into an ambulance. Only after the doors closed did Nathan remember why he had been driving through the storm in the first place. "Emma." He turned and ran toward his truck. The little girl burst into tears the moment he opened the driver's door. She wrapped both arms around him. "I thought you weren't coming back." Nathan hugged her tightly despite the freezing rain dripping from his clothes. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm right here." Minutes later, they continued toward the children's hospital. The storm forced traffic to crawl. Road crews blocked several lanes because of landslides. Nathan kept glancing nervously at the dashboard clock. 4:06 p.m. Then 4:18. Then 4:31. Every passing minute felt heavier than the last. When the hospital finally appeared through the rain, Nathan parked hurriedly and carried Emma through the entrance. He was soaked from head to toe. A receptionist looked up with sympathy before checking the schedule. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "Dr. Collins had to leave for emergency surgery about 15 minutes ago." Nathan's shoulders slowly sank. "The next available appointment?" She hesitated. "The earliest opening is 8 weeks from now." Nathan closed his eyes. He didn't say a word. Outside, the storm had finally begun to pass. But inside his heart, another one was only beginning. Kindness often asks for a price long before it offers any reward. 8 weeks passed more slowly than Nathan Brooks had ever imagined. Every morning began before sunrise. Every evening ended with another stack of unpaid bills spread across the small kitchen table. The missed hospital appointment had delayed Emma's treatment, and although she tried to smile through the fatigue, Nathan noticed the changes no father wanted to see. She tired more easily. Her laughter came less often. Some nights she fell asleep before finishing dinner. Still, she never complained. Instead, she would quietly ask the same question. "Did we do the right thing, Dad?" Nathan always answered without hesitation. "Yes." Even when he wasn't completely sure. To afford another specialist visit, Nathan accepted every temporary construction job he could find. Some days there was work. Many days there wasn't. The old pickup consumed more fuel than he could afford, and more than once he skipped lunch so Emma would never have to. Life simply kept moving. The woman from the accident slowly disappeared into memory. Nathan never learned her last name. Meanwhile, nearly 100 miles away, the intensive care unit of St. Andrew Medical Center remained unusually busy. Doctors entered and left a private room around the clock. Security officers stood outside the door 24 hours a day. Yet almost no one inside the hospital knew who the unconscious patient really was. 3 days after the accident, the machines surrounding her bed began sounding with steady improvement. A nurse leaned forward. "She's responding." Within minutes, physicians filled the room. Victoria slowly opened her eyes. The bright hospital lights blurred above her. Fragments of rain. A crashing vehicle. strong arms lifting her from the wreck. Everything returned in scattered pieces. "You're safe," a doctor said gently. She blinked several times before whispering her first question. "The man." The doctor frowned. "What man?" "The father." Her voice remained weak. "The one who rescued me." No one in the room had an answer. Within an hour, the silence outside her room disappeared. Black SUVs arrived one after another. Corporate attorneys, board members, private security, senior executives. News of Victoria Hayes waking from a near-fatal accident spread through the hospital with astonishing speed. The woman nearly everyone believed had died was not simply another patient. She was the founder and CEO of Hayes Global Industries, one of the largest infrastructure companies in the country. Television crews gathered outside before sunset. Financial markets reacted the next morning. Yet Victoria showed almost no interest in the flood of visitors waiting outside her hospital room. She interrupted every conversation with the same request. "I want to know who saved my life." Her chief of security stepped forward. "We're already investigating." "No." Victoria slowly shook her head. "I don't want assumptions." She looked directly at him. "I want his name." Within hours, investigators obtained highway patrol reports. Then emergency dispatch recordings. Then body camera footage from the rescue teams. Finally, someone located a dashboard camera from a rescue vehicle that had arrived moments after the landslide. Victoria watched the video in complete silence. A soaked man carrying her through waist-deep mud. His face filled with exhaustion. A little girl crying from inside an old pickup truck. The timestamp. The desperate climb. The vehicle disappearing beneath the landslide seconds after they escaped. Victoria covered her mouth. She realized something no report had mentioned. The little girl had been wearing a hospital wristband. The father hadn't been driving through the storm for himself. He had been racing to save his own child. And he had chosen a stranger instead. Tears slowly rolled down Victoria's face. She looked toward her security chief and spoke with quiet certainty. "Find Nathan Brooks. This isn't a request. It's the most important assignment you'll ever receive. Fate has a strange way of bringing two people together long before either of them understands why." Nathan Brooks had never heard of Hayes Global Industries. Even if someone had shown him a photograph of Victoria Hayes on the evening news, he probably wouldn't have recognized her. His days revolved around construction sites, grocery receipts, hospital phone calls, and making sure Emma never noticed how often he worried. The rescue had become just another memory tucked away among countless sacrifices a single father quietly carried. Monday morning began like every other. Nathan arrived at a construction site before sunrise, hoping the foreman still needed an extra pair of hands. Instead, he found a handwritten notice taped to the gate. "Project delayed. No work this week." He stared at the sign for several seconds before lowering his head. Another week without income. Another week of impossible choices. As he climbed back into his aging pickup, his phone buzzed. It was the pediatric clinic. "Mr. Brooks," the nurse said apologetically, "we've had a cancellation. Dr. Collins can see Emma tomorrow morning, but your insurance authorization has expired because of the missed appointment." Nathan closed his eyes. "How much would the visit cost?" After a brief pause, she quietly answered. "Approximately $2,400. Nathan thanked her politely before ending the call. He didn't have $200, much less $2,400. He rested both hands on the steering wheel, trying to think of another solution. There wasn't one. Across the state, inside the top floor of Hayes Global Headquarters, Victoria Hayes sat alone in a conference room. Stacks of reports lay untouched before her. Instead, the large screen displayed only one image. A pause frame from the rescue footage. Nathan carrying her through the storm. She had watched the recording dozens of times. Each viewing revealed another detail she had missed before. The exhaustion in his face. The mud covering his boots. The little girl waiting alone in the truck. The moment he chose a complete stranger over his own family's urgent destination. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her chief of security entered. "We found him." Victoria immediately looked up. "Tell me." "Nathan Brooks. 38 years old. Widower. Former Army combat engineer. Works temporary construction jobs." He hesitated before continuing. "He has a 9-year-old daughter named Emma." Victoria already knew the little girl's name from the hospital records. "What else?" The room grew unusually quiet. "His daughter has a chronic medical condition." Victoria listened without speaking. "He missed her specialist appointment the day of your accident." The words seemed to drain every bit of color from her face. The security chief continued carefully. "The appointment couldn't be rescheduled for 2 months." Victoria looked back toward the frozen image on the screen. The truth settled heavily in her heart. Nathan hadn't simply risked his life. He had delayed his daughter's medical care to save hers. She whispered almost to herself. "He sacrificed his child for someone he didn't even know." "No," the security chief corrected gently. "He trusted that saving a life was the right thing to do." Silence filled the room. Finally, Victoria stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she had spent decades building. Billions of dollars. Thousands of employees. Hundreds of successful acquisitions. Yet none of those achievements felt as significant as one exhausted father climbing a muddy hillside with a stranger in his arms. Without turning around, she gave her next instruction. "Prepare my helicopter." The security chief blinked. "To visit one of our regional offices?" Victoria slowly shook her head. "No." She smiled for the first time since the accident. "We're going to find the man who reminded me what success is actually supposed to look like. The people who change our lives rarely arrive wearing the titles we expect." Nathan was replacing broken fence posts on a small family farm when an unfamiliar black SUV rolled slowly onto the property. Every worker stopped to watch. Vehicles like that didn't belong on jobs like this. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped out, carrying a slim leather folder. He looked completely out of place among the muddy boots and weathered tools. "Mr. Nathan Brooks?" he asked politely. Nathan set down his shovel. "That's me." The man smiled. "My name is Daniel Foster. I represent someone who would like to meet you." Nathan frowned. "I think you've got the wrong person." "I'm quite certain I don't." Daniel handed him an elegant envelope sealed with a silver emblem. Nathan carefully opened it. Inside was a single invitation. "Mr. Nathan Brooks, Ms. Victoria Hayes would be honored if you would join her for lunch tomorrow at Hayes Global Headquarters. Transportation will be provided." Nathan stared at the card for several moments. The name meant nothing to him. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "Who is Victoria Hayes?" Daniel blinked in surprise. "You don't know?" Nathan simply shook his head. The attorney couldn't help smiling. For the first time in years, he had met someone who genuinely had no idea who one of the country's most influential business leaders was. "She believes she owes you a debt." Nathan immediately thought back to the accident. "The woman from the mountain?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." Nathan looked at the invitation again. "You don't have to send a car. We insist. I've got my own truck." Daniel glanced briefly toward the rusted pickup parked beside the barn. "I can see that." Nathan smiled politely. "It still runs." The following morning, Nathan drove himself to the city after dropping Emma off at school. His faded jeans and clean plaid shirt were the nicest clothes he owned. As Hayes Global Headquarters came into view, he slowed almost instinctively. The building towered above the surrounding skyline like polished glass reaching into the clouds. Luxury cars filled the entrance. Executives hurried through revolving doors while security officers greeted arriving guests by name. Nathan suddenly wondered whether he should turn around. He clearly didn't belong here. Before he could make that decision, a valet approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Brooks?" Nathan looked surprised. "Yes. We've been expecting you." The valet didn't laugh at the old pickup. He parked it with the same care given to every expensive vehicle nearby. Inside, employees greeted Nathan with unexpected respect. No one stared. No one whispered. They simply welcomed him. An assistant escorted him to the executive floor. As the elevator climbed higher, Nathan watched the city disappear beneath the clouds. When the doors finally opened, Daniel was waiting. "This way, Mr. Brooks." They walked through a quiet hallway lined with photographs showing bridges, hospitals, schools, and disaster recovery projects completed by Hayes Global over the past 3 decades. Daniel stopped before 2 enormous wooden doors. "She's inside." Nathan took a slow breath. "I should tell you something." Daniel waited. "I didn't come here expecting anything. I never saved her because I wanted a reward." Daniel nodded gently. "She already knows." The doors opened. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Victoria Hayes stood waiting near the glass, no longer dressed as a patient fighting for her life but as the confident leader of a global company. Yet the moment she saw Nathan, the distance created by titles, wealth, and success disappeared. Her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Then Victoria walked toward him, stopped only a few feet away, and softly said, "I've spent 8 weeks wondering how to thank the man who gave me a second chance. Today, I'd rather begin by simply saying thank you. Some gifts change your circumstances. Others change the direction of your entire life." Victoria invited Nathan to sit beside the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A simple lunch had been prepared. No reporters. No photographers. No executives crowding the room. Just 2 people whose lives had crossed on a rain-soaked mountainside. Nathan looked around the enormous office. "I've never been anywhere like this." Victoria smiled. "Neither had I once." She poured coffee for both of them herself. The gesture surprised Nathan more. Then the luxurious office. "I've spent weeks thinking about what I could possibly give you," she began. "You don't owe me anything," Nathan answered gently. "I saved a life. I'd do it again." Victoria held his gaze. "I know. And that's exactly why you deserve more than a simple thank you." She slid a folder across the table. Nathan opened it. Inside was a certified check. The number made him stop breathing for a moment. It was more money than he could have earned in many years. He slowly pushed it back toward her. "I'm sorry." Victoria looked confused. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because then it would feel like I sold what happened that day." The room fell silent. Victoria studied him carefully. Most people spent their lives chasing wealth. Nathan was quietly walking away from it. Not because he was proud. Because his principles meant more to him than comfort. A smile slowly appeared on Victoria's face. She reached forward and closed the folder. "I was hoping you'd say that." Nathan blinked. "You were? That wasn't the real reason I invited you." She pressed a button on the conference table. The large screen behind her illuminated. Images began appearing one after another. Floods. Wildfires. Collapsed bridges. Families waiting for rescue. Volunteers carrying children through dangerous conditions. Nathan recognized the expressions on their faces. Fear. Hope. Determination. Victoria stood beside the screen. "After the accident, I realized something." She paused. "My company has spent decades rebuilding communities after disasters. But we've never invested enough in the people who run toward danger before anyone else arrives." She turned to face Nathan. "I want to change that." Another folder appeared. This one was much thinner. Nathan opened it. At the top of the first page were the words, Executive Director Hayes Community Rescue Foundation. His eyes widened. "I don't understand." Victoria smiled. "I've created a national foundation dedicated to training civilian emergency volunteers, supporting rescue teams, and helping families affected by disasters." She took a slow breath. "I don't need someone with the most impressive resume. I need someone who understands why strangers matter." Nathan looked almost overwhelmed. I've never managed a foundation. I've never worked in an office. I barely finished community college. Victoria nodded. I know. You also climbed into a collapsing vehicle during a landslide because someone you had never met needed help. She stepped closer. Leadership isn't always learned in boardrooms. Sometimes it's learned on mountainsides. Nathan stared at the proposal. His first thought wasn't about himself. It would provide health insurance? Victoria smiled. For you. For Emma. And every treatment she needs. Nathan closed his eyes. For weeks he had wondered how he would afford another appointment. Now, for the first time since the storm, that burden lifted from his shoulders. He looked back at Victoria. What if I fail? Victoria's answer came without hesitation. The man who carried me through a landslide isn't afraid of hard work. She extended her hand. I can't promise this job will be easy. I can promise it will save lives. Nathan looked at her hand, then thought about Emma, the missed appointment, the storm that had nearly taken everything from them, and the unexpected road that had led him here. Finally, he smiled. Not because his life had suddenly become easier, but because, for the first time in a very long time, he could see a future that was bigger than survival. He reached forward and shook Victoria's hand. Let's get to work. 1 year can transform a life, but only if someone is brave enough to change its direction. The first anniversary of the landslide arrived on a clear autumn morning. The same mountain stood quietly beneath a bright blue sky. The same winding highway carried travelers through the valley. Yet almost everything else had changed. Inside the national headquarters of the Hayes Community Rescue Foundation, volunteers from across the country filled a large training center with energy and purpose. Some were firefighters. Others were nurses, teachers, truck drivers, college students, and retired military veterans. Different lives. One mission. Nathan Brooks stood at the front of the room wearing a Navy Foundation jacket instead of worn construction clothes. The title on his office door read Executive Director. But titles had never mattered much to him. Character did. Every rescue begins long before anyone calls for help, he told the new volunteers. It begins with a decision. The room fell completely silent. You decide whether another person's life is worth interrupting your own. You decide whether fear will stop you. You decide who you become. No one took their eyes off him. His words carried the weight of experience rather than theory. When the session ended, dozens of volunteers remained behind to thank him. Not because he was famous. Because they believed him. Across town, Emma skipped down the hallway of Children's Medical Center carrying a backpack covered with colorful patches collected from foundation events. She looked healthier than she had in years. Dr. Collins smiled as he finished reviewing her latest test results. I think we've reached the day your father has been waiting for. Emma's eyes widened. Really? The doctor nodded. Your treatment has been remarkably successful. He looked toward Nathan. She's doing wonderfully. Nathan felt something inside him finally release. The burden he had carried since that terrible storm slowly dissolved. He blinked several times, trying unsuccessfully to hide the tears gathering in his eyes. Emma wrapped her arms around him. I told you everything would be okay, Dad. Nathan laughed softly. You were right. Later that afternoon, Victoria joined them outside the hospital. She had become a regular part of Emma's life over the past year. Not as a powerful CEO. Simply as a trusted friend. Emma ran toward her with an enormous smile. Guess what? Victoria laughed. I have a feeling you're about to tell me. My tests are the best they've ever been. Victoria hugged her tightly. I couldn't be happier. Nathan watched them together with quiet gratitude. A year earlier, they had been strangers connected only by tragedy. Now they had become something much stronger. A family built not by blood, but by compassion. That evening, the foundation hosted a small ceremony honoring ordinary citizens who had risked their lives to help others. Nathan stood beside the stage but refused to stand on it. Instead, he invited each volunteer forward first. When Victoria finally approached the microphone, She looked toward Nathan before addressing the audience. "A year ago, one man taught me that leadership is not measured by wealth, influence, or success." She smiled. "It is measured by the willingness to carry another person when life becomes too heavy for them to walk alone." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Nathan lowered his head, embarrassed by the attention. Then he noticed Emma clapping louder than anyone else. Their eyes met. Neither of them needed to say a word. Both understood that the greatest miracle had never been surviving the storm. It had been discovering that one selfless choice could create thousands more. Life rarely gives us the chance to return to the place where everything changed. 2 years after the storm, Nathan Brooks steered his pickup along the same mountain road where fate had rewritten his family's future. The truck was newer now. Emma, sitting beside him, was taller than she had been that rainy afternoon. Her cheeks carried a healthy glow that once seemed impossible. She was reading a book until she looked out the window and quietly smiled. "We're almost there." Nathan nodded. "I know." Every year on the anniversary of the rescue, they returned to the mountain. Not to remember fear, but to honor the choice that had changed so many lives. The rain had been replaced by warm sunshine. Wildflowers covered the hillsides where mud and broken trees had once buried the highway. Near the overlook stood a modest stone monument. There were no bronze statues. No oversized plaques celebrating heroes. Only a simple inscription. "One act of courage can become 1,000 acts of kindness." Below the words was the emblem of the Hayes Community Rescue Foundation. Nathan stood silently before it. He still didn't think of himself as a hero. He never had. Behind them, several foundation vehicles arrived carrying volunteers participating in their annual mountain rescue training exercise. Victoria stepped out of the first SUV, smiling as she walked toward them. "I had a feeling you'd get here." Before everyone else. Nathan laughed softly. Old habits. Emma hugged Victoria before joining the other volunteers preparing equipment nearby. Watching her run across the field, Nathan could hardly believe how much life had changed. She no longer looked like a frightened little girl waiting alone in an old truck. She looked like hope. Victoria stood beside Nathan, looking toward the valley. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had kept driving that day?" Nathan remained quiet for a long moment. Finally he answered, "Sometimes." "And?" He smiled gently. "I always reached the same conclusion. If I had driven away." He looked toward Emma. "I might have saved a few hours. But I would have lost the man I wanted my daughter to remember." Victoria lowered her eyes. Those words stayed with her. Before either of them could speak again, a shout echoed from farther down the road. "Someone needs help." Without hesitation, Nathan and several volunteers ran toward the voice. A young couple stood beside a disabled car. The husband had injured his ankle after slipping down a rocky embankment while trying to place emergency warning triangles behind the vehicle. Nothing life-threatening. Just frightened travelers unsure what to do. Nathan knelt beside the injured man. "We've got you." Within minutes, trained volunteers stabilized the ankle while others directed traffic and contacted roadside assistance. Emma handed the couple bottles of water and blankets from the emergency supplies stored in the foundation vehicles. The young woman looked around in amazement. "Are all of you rescue workers?" Nathan smiled. "Some are. Most are simply people who decided to stop." As the ambulance departed, the mountain road became quiet once more. Victoria looked at the dozens of volunteers helping strangers without expecting recognition. She realized that the foundation had accomplished far more than training rescuers. It had created a community where compassion spread from one person to another, just as a single light can ignite countless others without growing dim. Nathan slipped his hand into Emma's as they began walking back toward the overlook. The sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains, bathing the valley in golden light. Years earlier, a frightened woman had whispered, "Leave me." A tired father had refused. Because of that one decision, a little girl received the future she deserved. A business leader rediscovered the meaning of success. Thousands of volunteers found a purpose greater than themselves. and countless strangers would one day return home to the people waiting for them. Sometimes the smallest decision becomes the moment that defines an entire life. And sometimes, that one moment keeps saving lives long after the storm has passed.